Good evening, everybody. So, I'm psyched. So, what's up for today, Ron? What's the story for today?
Well, one of our clients is a young gentleman by the name of Charles Slepian. He has a pretty long list of accomplishments over his lifetime, least of which was he worked closely with one of my favorite mayors, and I was a young guy at the time, Mayor Lindsay, in New York. Charles has spent better part of his professional career helping businesses and organizations, governmental and whatnot, manage, sift through, uncover, identify, and mitigate risks, all kinds of risks, trucking industry, aviation industry, financial industry, just all different types of businesses, because there's all kinds of different risks out there. And that might be another theme that we're going through today, because we have a gentleman that deals with retail risk, Tom does, and then we have Charles, who helps organizations figure out how to mitigate these risks and identify them. We wanted to have a little discussion today about the aviation industry and issues that have been forefront for years now, even prior to even the 9/11 matter. And he has a quick little story about that as well. But we wanted to welcome Charles and listen to what he has to say about the industry that we hold near and dear, because it affects our lives every day. Yeah, I mean, welcome, Charles.
I'm blown away by the story. So, I mean, I could literally, we wouldn't make any money, but I could sit here and talk to him all day long, because the information is just, you sit there and you're just like, every time I sit and have a conversation, I'm like, wow, that's really going on? Are you kidding me? But it's unbelievable. So, yeah, Charles, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me back again.
So, yeah, I mean, it's great to have him back. I mean, the aviation, industry, stuff that goes on, and with the airlines, I mean, nowadays, and stuff that's kind of like hidden. So kind of get into a little bit about, I guess, what your first statement was going to be about what's going on with the airlines.
Let me just say this. People ask me very often, how did I get involved with this question of aviation security? I was on a flight from Washington, D.C. to New York City, and the flight attendant was talking to passengers behind me. And they asked her a number of questions, which was, I could almost predict what they were going to ask her, because she was absolutely stunning. But one of them said, well, where do you live? And she said, well, I live in Manhattan. And they said, how do you like it? And she said, I hate it. And my ears perked up, because at the time I was director of tourism for New York City. And he said, well, why do you hate it? And she said, well, it's expensive. It's dangerous. The people are unfriendly. I'm afraid to go out at night. I'm afraid to come home at night.
You sure they weren't talking about Los Angeles?
Well, I tried to convince the guys behind me that she really meant Los Angeles. But the fact is, she was telling the truth. There was a problem. Her problem was she just didn't know how to live in New York City. And New York City wasn't selling itself. We had a real high crime rate. My job was to market New York City as a destination for tourists. And she really just kind of blew it away. So when I got back to my office, I sent a letter to the Vice President of In-Flight Services for American Airlines. They had the route at the time. And I said, I listened to one of your flight attendants, and she was very sincere. And I understand what she was saying. But the fact is, you guys are not doing a good job in your training. She came to New York from Texas. She was unprepared. She was 22 years old, and she's frightened by everything she sees.
Sure.
Well, I sent my letter off. I felt better. A week later, I got buzzed on the intercom, and the receptionist said, there are 2 young ladies here to see you. I said, okay, who are they? And she read off their names on business cards and said, well, they're flight attendants from American Airlines. Actually, they were flight service trainers for American Airlines from LaGuardia Airport. I said, well, send them on down.
Who wouldn't, right? 2 young girls coming?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was a young man at the time. Anyway, they came on down, and I said, well, ladies, I can almost predict why you're here. You want to yell at me because I sent a letter off. And she said, no. We have something here that you'll need. And she handed me a sheet of paper. And on that sheet of paper was my schedule for the next several years, at which time I would greet every new class of flight attendants coming into New York and explain how to negotiate New York as a place to live. And I would bring in guests, cops, firemen, tavern owners, and so on. And it worked out very, very well, and they changed their tune. Well, that was the beginning of selling something. I was selling New York City, and I was selling against a horrific crime rate. And we really had a terrible crime rate. And I looked into why we had the terrible crime rate. We hadn't trained our businesses on how to respond to it. We hadn't trained our police on how to respond to some of the issues that came up. But most of all, businesses have to train their employees to sell what's good about the business, not the negatives. Because the negatives tend to be related to your personal life. And you really don't want to go there. And so that started airlines. I did the same thing for the hotel industry in New York City. Those things moved nationally. But first and foremost in my life has always been aviation. And what I have seen in aviation has been absolutely astounding. We're surprised that we're threatened by terrorism. I'm not surprised. It's easy to be an airline terrorist.
It's funny because you mentioned something outside, and that was actually a published story that you had written before 9/11, and it's almost like the guy had a crystal ball, which is unbelievable. So would you mind just touching on that story?
Well, Rich, it wasn't a crystal ball. Actually, what I was talking about were things that were happening and nobody was mentioning it. I was addressing a group at a convention on aviation security in San Francisco 30 days before 9/11. And I said to the group, we are running the risk now of having buildings destroyed by missiles that are really airplanes. Because a plot was uncovered. I mean, it wasn't me being clairvoyant. There was a plot. It was called the Bojinka Affair, and you can look it up. And it was a group of terrorists whose plan was to hijack 12 airliners in the Pacific, fly them all to the United States on the same day, and fly them into buildings. And it was broken up by a tip to local law enforcement. It might have been in Singapore. And they broke into the hotel suite, and they got all the information. So there you had it. This was 13, 14 years before 9/11.
Wow.
And all we did was go into denial. So now I had to make a speech to a group, and at the group I said, this is what we're going to run into. They said, nah, it can't happen. Can't happen in New York. Can't happen at JFK. Well, I knew better. I knew it could happen in New York. And if it was going to happen, it was going to be in New York because they had already tried to take down the World Trade Center a few years earlier, but without an airplane. And so from there started a very, very scary time in my life. I had said that this was going to happen, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later it happened.
It's amazing. So, what we do is, I guess, as human beings, is that we just kind of like, as you mentioned before, always like burying our head in the sand. It's like, this could never happen to me. This will never happen. And then, I guess part of the beauty of your business, it's the foreseeable risk. What are some of the things or crimes or things that we don't like, things that people like just, they never would think about or they don't hear about that happen every day that you know about?
Well, I'd like to know who's working on the ramp when you look out the window and you see who's loading the bags, because I'm never sure what they're loading. Only they know what they're loading.
Right.
If we talk about blowing up airplanes, that's where it starts. It starts down on the ramp. And you can search my grandmother, if she was still alive, all you want, and you're not going to find a bomb in her purse. But if you're looking for an explosive, which is why we have aviation security to begin with, it's not there to break up fights. It's not there to confiscate pocket knives. It's there to find explosives before the explosives take down planes. And so we give lip service to the planes that crash, but then we go back and we go through your bags and say, well, what is this and what is that? As I showed you before, my penknife, which is also a money clip, is in no danger to anybody on the plane. I can't take down an airplane with it. I can't hijack it, because you can't hijack a plane anymore unless you can get into the flight deck. And you can't get into the flight deck unless the captain that day is feeling very friendly and flies with the door open, which sometimes happens. And if I'm on the plane, I remind them to shut it. But the fact is, that is not the issue. The issue is, how can a terrorist destroy our economy? How does a terrorist upset us? Well, I go back to 1941. The Japanese knew what they needed to do. Wipe out our fleet and wipe out our Air Force, basically, and that's what they did. They sunk the ships in Pearl Harbor, and they bombed the airfield in Pearl Harbor, and they had a 6-month head start on us in the war. Air power is everything, and it's still everything. It may not be the air power that we think about dropping a bomb on some place, but the power to move people, the power to move commerce, the power to stay in touch with the rest of the world is a very great and important force power that we have. And if we can't protect the aviation industry, if the aviation industry cannot protect your checked bag, and it's checked, and they know they have it, if they can't do that, how in the hell are they going to stop a bomb from being put on a plane? Which, by the way, they have never been able to do. And we test it every year, and the bombs still get on the plane at the test. And we don't do that because of a number of things we need to do, but we don't have enough time here to go through it.
Well, I have all the warm and fuzzies now about getting on the plane. I'm psyched. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. So,
have a good flight.
Yeah. So, if you can, just quickly, because we're a little bit short on time. But you know what? I think we're going to have you back next week. But okay, I'm getting on a plane in a couple weeks. I'm going to be flying down to Florida. What are some of the things that just your everyday, we're just regular people going on a plane. What are some of the things that maybe we should be looking at to kind of be, a little bit more, intelligent about what we have going on in the, while I get on a flight?
You can't stop the security failures. What you want to do is protect yourself, protect your baggage, protect your family. You get on the plane, you got to worry about what are you taking on the plane that's going to delay you at the screening station. You want to be delayed there. You want to go right on through. Of course, if there's going to be some kind of an event, it's likely to happen there. So take what you need. Don't put valuables in your checked luggage, because a lot of people who work in airports make a second living out of that mistake. Take your valuables on your person. And even when you're being checked at the screening station, you stand there and you watch that wallet that's going through the machine, and you be on the other end when it comes through. Because TSA has a terrible problem with pilfered bags in their custody. And it's just an issue. I mean, these are guys who are earning $35,000 to $40,000 a year, and they're seeing great wealth going past them every day, and the temptation is just too great.
I see the focus is in the wrong places a lot of times. I mean, I see them patting down, 10-year-old kids.
Yeah, or like 85-year-old women in wheelchairs. Like that's going to help us out. Anyway, Charles, listen, I want to thank you again for being on the show today. That was awesome. We'll pick this up again next week, because I think this is something we need to kind of expand upon. But appreciate that, and look forward to talking to you.
It'll be just before your flight, so it'll make you feel extra warm and fuzzy.
Absolutely.
Flying is still the safest way to travel.
I agree with that.
Keep that in mind.
Thank God for that.